one of the first things I noticed was that in the bulletin, the program, they added a U to color. So that was the message to me that you are in Canada. I also noticed Yetkin talked a lot about the scientific education. I've noticed that almost all the people in the Gulen movement are engineers, so I've decided to call myself a theological engineer. Once in a while, reading through the Quran, a particular phrase captures my attention. And recently it was a verse from Surah Al-Baqarah, the color of God. And who is better than God with respect to coloring? And we are his servants. Traditional commentaries read this as God's embellishment of or influence on humanity, as a dye changes cloth. Commonly, they refer to a Christian practice of dyeing baptizees, especially babies, yellow as proof of baptism. You see the image of the baptism there. This last interpretation has led some to read the word sibgha as meaning baptism. I found no evidence of this practice in early Christianity, but of 19 translations that I checked, this is the rendering of 5, including the ever-popular Yusuf Ali. Other explanations treat the word sibgha as an active participle, God's act of coloring humanity, not as the actual color of God. This is not the best reflection of the grammar, but is the rendering of 6 other translations. A more accurate translation is the above. What is the color of God, and who is better than God with respect to color? This, or equivalents, I found in 7 translations. Can God have color? In one sense, this violates a concept of God that asserts that God's nature is beyond description and manifestation. But let me read a fuller translation in the translation of Ali Unal. Unal inserts a significant amount of commentary within his translation in order to, as he says, make the meaning clear. O Muslims, say we take the color of God, the color that he has put on the whole universe, not the color some party put upon themselves through some rites in the name of religion. Who is better than God in coloring? And whose color is better than God's? And we are those who worship, as he is to be worshipped exclusively. As you can see, there's a considerable amount of elaboration, and Unal includes all 3 translations of color: as a rite, as an active participle, the act of coloring, and as a noun, the color of God. Unal's translation of the Quran is praised and recommended by Fethullah Gulen in his introduction to the work. Gulen is a leader in interfaith relations and the pursuit of tolerance among religions. But everything that Gulen does is premised on the Quran. Every paper today that you hear has the Quran speaking in the background. To speak of Gulen and his movement is to speak of the Quran. The Gulen movement is the Quran in action. As a great admirer of Gulen, I therefore read Unal's translation with particular care and interest. I also read it as a Christian. This presents some hermeneutical problems that I want to address most specifically and at length, because it necessarily affects my reading of the Quran. Any reading of the Quran must take into account the Quran's own testimony about what it is and how it should be received. The Quran as a sacred book demands to be read with utmost seriousness. This is not an expectation to be treated casually. It is as much of the substance of the Quran as is its grammar or vocabulary. To read the Quran is to understand its intention, which is to transform the reader, to induce the reader to become Muslim in the sense of one who submits to God. Can we, Christians and others, read it correctly if we are not open to the possibility of such transformation? It is not necessarily that we must become Muslim in the sense of an adherent to the religion of Islam, but we must enter into the space of the Quranic world if we are to understand what the Quran is trying to tell us. In this light, all of us are its intended readership. Many of us might demur. We are Christians, Jews, Sikhs, and so forth, all with our own holy books, central to our own communities of faith. It is through those books that we feel ourselves to be addressed religiously. In none of our communities is the Quran the designated or even an acknowledged source of holy wisdom. It is not religious reading for us, but this is not the point. The Quran is, in its own presentation, sacred text, even if we do not recognize it as authoritative for us. It recognizes itself as authoritative for us.